Good morning, everybody. Thank you for the opportunity to address all of you today morning. As you would have noticed, there's a lot of lessons that have been learned from around the world around how to build better institutions, how to execute reforms. What I wanted to do today was to take a very practical example of Qatar, where I had the opportunity to serve for 9 years, and talk about how we actually did it, and really talk you through the practical example rather than theoretical lessons learned. In order to do that, I need to give a little bit of context, because perhaps the Qatar story is not well known. I mean, Qatar is well known in itself, but the story of Qatar is perhaps not told, is not narrated, it's not understood in its fullest extent. The first impression you get when you think about Qatar is that, yes, it's a fabulously rich place, it's got lots of energy resources, and it's sort of vibrant foreign policy, if I may call it that. And that's what it is known for. However, what I wanted to shed light today here was on financial services in particular, but of course, how Qatar has gone about building a knowledge-based economy, even though it's a hydrocarbons story that everybody hears about. So I wanted to give a brief introduction to Qatar and to lay down the grounds for the story of its reforms process across various sectors of the economy. As we all know, that it boasts a very robust economy with the third largest gas reserves on the planet. Even though it's the third largest reserves of gas, it is the leading exporter of gas on the planet. At current rates of extraction, Qatar can extract for 200 years at current extraction rates. It obviously has one of the highest per capita GDPs in the world. Yet, instead of resting on all of that wealth, it could have very easily taken the route of other energy and resource-rich economies and not done anything more than enjoying the fabulous wealth that it has. However, what it has done is that it has gone about building a knowledge-based, diversified economy, and actually within the space of 10 years, roughly 10 years. The hydrocarbons portion of the GDP is down to around 50%. This number changes and fluctuates quite volatile every year depending upon the energy prices. However, they've still managed to bring it down to around half of the GDP. They've gone about building sustainable industries, so that it's not based on entertainment or retail or real estate. It's actually creating very sustainable industries for the long run. There has been a stability and consistency in the reforms process across all sectors of the economy, not just in hydrocarbons or in financial services where I worked, but in other ones as well, which I will touch upon. This is a country which is run by engineers. And that's a very important mindset thing that one needs to understand in terms of the context of how they went about executing the reforms. A lot of countries have a trading mindset. It's a trader mindset. Qatar doesn't have that. So the risk-taking is very scientific-based risk-taking rather than a gambling-based risk-taking. So it results in different outcomes. It results in the way you approach things is extremely different in Qatar. There's been keen focus on the quality of stuff that you do and execute, and not the quantity, because reputation is key. It takes years to build, and it's absolutely irreplaceable. One of the fundamental features that I remember when I first went to Qatar, and the chairman of the Qatar Financial Center was the finance minister, and to lay down the context to the international board members and other people, he said, we want to follow the Boston model, not the Las Vegas model. And I think that underpins the philosophy that Qatar has in terms of executing its reforms and building the institutions and the quality of those institutions that it builds. This is what Qatar used to look like even in the mid-1990s, so only 20 years ago. It had a GDP roughly around less than $10 billion. Population was only 500,000 people. Per capita GDP, of course, was in the $15,000 to $16,000 range, and it had a BBB rating. Fast forward, 21st century. That's what it has done in 20 years. The GDP, of course, is over $200 billion. and that went from $8 billion, less than $10 billion. Now, of course, the population has grown rapidly. Despite that, the per capita GDPs have increased, and it has gone to a AA rating. Now, the point is that, of course, everybody will argue that it's all related with the fabulous gas energy exploitation and the energy that you earn from there. But like I mentioned before, only 50% of the economy is now energy-based. It's actually diversified into other sectors. This is what it has been able to achieve in that time. It's ranked the second most competitive economy in the Middle East. It's ranked the first in terms of financial centers in the Middle East and 20th in the world, top 20 in the world. This is when the QFC, the Qatar Financial Center, was established in 2005, so within 10 years' time. The third most innovative economy in the MENA region and 50th in the world. In terms of talent, second in the Middle East, 24th in the world. Most peaceful in the Middle East, 34th in the world. Second most network ready economy in the Middle East and 27th in the world. In order to, why am I showing this information is not to in any which way sell Qatar, but the idea is that in order to get to that, there are a lot of countries in the world which are energy rich and have resources, but they haven't achieved this. So why is it that this country has gone about trying to become a competitive economy, trying to actually create all this competitiveness and great systems? Is because the burgeoning economy and the vast growth of economy, the economy doubled in 6 years' time between 2009 and 2015. It puts a lot of pressure. The needs, the imperatives for having robust systems and robust institutions is far greater in an economy that is growing so rapidly and is becoming so rich so quickly, that the imperative is not just in poor countries which are looking for reforms, but also in high-income countries. So how has it gone about doing that? I'm just looking at 3 sectors over here: hydrocarbons, education, and financial services. There were policy reforms and strategy that was done, and I've taken examples of that. In hydrocarbons, people think it's just about extraction and selling. It actually isn't, and the way Qatar has gone about doing it is very different. They have actually integrated across the value chain of the LNG industry. At the extraction, then they liquefy it down to minus 160 degrees centigrades. They own that, they participate in that. Then it is transported to its markets on LNG ships. These are the biggest ships on the planet, and Qatar has gone about actually controlling that by having the largest fleet. So it's captured the value chain. Once the gas reaches its markets, it's regasified from liquid to gas. Qatar owns those facilities or participates in those facilities. And then when it is distributed, it takes part in the marketing of that as well. On the side of this, it has gone about building a petrochemicals industry. So actually, fiscally, Qatar can sell its gas for free and still make money, because the byproducts of the industry, such as sulfur, are massive industries in themselves. So they have gone about building a petrochemicals industry. Various institutions have been created for that. Qatar Gas Industries Qatar, which looks at petrochemicals. Qatar Petroleum, of course, is the holding company. And these have become areas of excellence and knowledge and capturing all of that. Most importantly, private participation. They never shied away from private participation, whether it's at extraction, at liquefaction, down the road, at regasification. Exxon, Total, Mobil, Shell, etc. And it's an important point to bear in mind, because what could be more strategic asset than gas for this country? And yet they allow foreign participation in that. In fact, the Western countries have been a bit reluctant to allow foreign participation in their strategic assets. So that's how open the policymakers are. I'll skip the next one in the interest of time, but that actually looked at hydrocarbons a little bit more in detail. The reason I've been talking about that instead of financial services is to emphasize the well thought out strategy and the reforms and the institution building that the country has undertaken. Financial services landscape. This is what it looked like before the Qatar Financial Center was set up. There was a central bank. Qatar Exchange, which is the stock market, was a self-regulating body. There was no securities. There was no securities regulator. And of course, the Ministry of Finance, which looked after insurance. But let me put a little bit more color on this. Insurance regulations, before the QFC was set up, was about 20 pages long. They were written in the 1960s. They gave capital adequacy in Indian rupees, because Indian rupee was the currency in the Gulf countries before those countries became independent. And it had not been updated. Similarly, you found across the system you had antiquated regulations which could not keep pace with the growing needs of the economy. Fast forward 10 years, it's ranked 20 out of 82 countries in the Global Financial Centers Index. Various regulatory bodies, institutions had been created by that time. The roles had been defined very clearly, and the industry participation, again, you went from having a couple of banks down to having 348 licensed firms, 91 of them regulated firms within a span of 10 years' time. Importantly, coordinating mechanisms, because things quite often work in very siloed manner. So they did away with all of that by creating mechanisms such as the Financial Stability Committee and the Economic Affairs Committee. One point to note here is Qatar Investment Authority. Qatar Investment Authority was actually only established in 2004. It's not a very old institution. Coming to Qatar Financial Center. So when they looked across the landscape of financial services, what they realized was, A, the regulations were very antiquated. They could not cater to and meet with the needs of a modern economy. More importantly, the legal environment itself was so antiquated and not prepared. So you could not set up special purpose vehicles. Nobody in the country had heard of protected cell companies. Nobody in the country knew how to create trust companies for financial services, etc. So the policymakers, the way they looked at it was, right, we are going to create a policy lab. We are going to create a one country, two systems the way China has it. It's not going to be a free zone. They're going to create it onshore. It's not going to be a tax haven. So that was extremely important. That's the engineering mindset of actually trying to do the right things. Not be tax haven, focus on quality, try and do the right thing. So these were the institutions that were created. The important thing is that these institutions were created and authorized and given the powers to actually make those regulations, make those changes. The governance was very clearly defined. There is no cross-pollination in the boards of these various entities. They are all independent. Each one in turn reports into the Council of Ministers, which is the highest lawmaking body in the country. If you create a legal environment, and the legal environment in Qatar and most of the Gulf countries is actually quite interesting. It's Sharia law for personal, but it's Napoleonic Egyptian law for civil and commercial matters. And it's all in Arabic, so nobody can understand it, or it's very difficult to do business in that environment. So they actually created an English law based, they did not copy wholesale the English law, the English common law based legal environment was created from scratch. Employment, immigration, contracts, you name it. The entire paraphernalia of legal environment was created. If you do that, they very quickly realized that you actually need special courts who specialize in these kind of things. And they were not at all reluctant to actually create special courts and give them the powers to actually make judgments and carry on the process very fast. So I have actually run out of time. So I'm going to leave the floor now and leave it for other questions that you might have and try and address those at a later stage. Thank you.